Hi, Jordan.
Hello, Tony. How are you doing?
Well, I'm excited that you're here. So I'm really glad that you've found the time in your enormously busy schedule to appear on the podcast. I know a bit about you, but for the listeners today and the listeners to come, who have probably also heard a bit about you, but could you share your full name and what it is you do today?
Yeah, I'm Jordan Wylie. I guess I do lots of different things, but I like to think of myself as an adventurer and an author. And I wear quite a few different caps with young people's organisations like the Cadets and various charities. But I try to do these days what I love, and that's adventure. And then I go and talk about it and write about it.
Awesome. It's just like if you said to a child, what do you want to be when you grow up? Adventurer, author. I mean,
But my caveat would be it doesn't pay you a lot of money. You get to have lots of fun, but it doesn't pay you a lot of
yeah.
money. So it's
Um,
why it's not priority for a lot of people.
so adventurer author today, but let's go back to secondary school and what your memories are of that time in your life.
Oh, in that time in my life, I'd have probably been better known as a little tearaway.
Okay.
I was often up to no good. Um,
Yeah.
oh, what was school like for me? School was, do you know, all I cared about at that age was playing football, wanting to, and
Yeah.
sport. I was at that sort of stage of my life. I was pretty good. I don't mind saying actually at most sports. I was a bit of an all rounder. If it was on the
Mm.
athletic, if it was on a football pitch, if it was with a cricket bat or a basketball, I played for all the schools teams and for the county and things. So I just love sport and I love being outside as well. And which probably didn't bode well for me at school because I hated being in a classroom.
Yeah.
It just didn't do it for me. I don't know what it was, and to be very honest, even today when I go back into schools, I still get that feeling when I'm walking in a classroom to speak to children. It still makes me feel like really tight and enclosed and just want to be outside and almost like it's almost claustrophobic in a non-orthodox way. Um,
Yeah.
but I came from a very working class family. My family both sort of grew up on council estates and worked very hard to get off them. My father was in the military in the Royal Marines, and my mum was had lots of different jobs as I was growing up. But she was whatever I lacked, maybe materially, I gained in love
Yeah.
and support for sure. I didn't go without any love or support. That was for certain. And they did their best and have done their best for me all their life and have been great role models. And when I look back at school, I feel a bit like I let them down and let myself down because I just didn't apply myself. I was, the academic sort of way of sitting in a classroom and learning in that style just never really worked for me. And I found it really difficult. And as a result, I became quite disruptive, I think, in a lot of my lessons.
Mm.
Don't get me wrong, I wasn't the worst. There was a lot worse than me. But when I look back and reflect, I was, yeah, I was a bit of a nuisance to a lot of teachers. As I say, I was probably quite disruptive. And, the only thing that really interested me was PE. And
Mm.
even the theoretical side of PE, I didn't really enjoy that. The sort of the science and what went with it. I just found it again going back into a classroom really challenging. Um,
Mm.
I was often in trouble with the law as well. I'm ashamed to say at 14, 15, 16, I had numerous sort of um, skirmishes with the police. Found myself in a cell locked in a cell for the night for whatever it was, drunken disorderly or breach of the peace, or being a nuisance to society for, like a lot of my friends were at the time. We would get up to no good on the parks on Friday, Saturday nights, and I
Yeah.
guess terrorize locals and innocent bystanders. Um, and again, that's not something I'm proud of. I'm laughing at that, and I shouldn't, because it's not something I'm proud of. I'm actually ashamed of it, and I needed to, dare I say, get out. I love Blackpool very much, but I needed to get
Mm.
out of Blackpool and probably find my own way in the world. And I joined the military at 16, and I guess the rest was history, as they say. I had to grow up quite quickly.
So there were a couple of things in that, and one is that like you, I grew up on council estate in the southeast of England. But that thing of hanging about down parks, big gangs of us doing it, and I sort of can think, how do we how did that happen? How do we get access to the alcohol that we did? Well, we bought them from the shop. But it was very much normal. That was just how it was. And our poor teachers used to put up with a lot. So I can relate to that just being part of everyday life. Um, and then I wonder, did you take your GCSEs then? Did you do PE as GCSE?
Yeah, it was the only GCSE I got, and
Yeah.
I remember my teacher telling me I was on for an A star, and the reason I didn't get it, because it was basically, I don't know how it is these days, but it was split into physical and theoretical, and
Mm,
I was on for an A star in PE until
mm,
the exams and the theoretical side, and I actually I think I got a B, which I was really disappointed in actually, but that was because I didn't revise, I didn't do all the theory side of it, what I needed to do, but it was the only GCSE I got. All the
mm,
rest were sort of E's and D's or whatever they were. But
yeah.
yeah, no A to C's except for PE. And
Mm,
yeah, and that's a great shame. But I also think you shouldn't. Life is one big lesson, and you're continually learning all the time. And I think I would say to any young person, you have to take the lessons from that phase of your life and apply
mm,
them to whatever's coming in the future, because it's certainly not defined me in any way. In fact, if anything, I've used it as fuel to push on. But
mm,
at the same time, education is really important. And what I would also say is, having traveled the world for the last 20 years plus and seen the power of education in some of the harshest environments on the planet, conflict zones, war zones, and areas of great deprivation,
mm,
education is one of the best tools that you will find in the world that will inspire hope for a brighter future. So I would encourage anyone, while you've got the opportunity, if you've got the opportunity, to give it your all, give it 110% if you're at school,
mm,
whether it's the way you learn or not. What you have got is a very privileged opportunity, which a lot of people don't have access to in the world.
mm,
So, but at the same time, I've had to go through a big journey to learn that and understand that and see a lot of the world. And I guess a lot of people won't ever see some of the things that I've
mm.
seen, being a soldier and so on.
And to that point of signing up with was it the army that you joined? Um,
The British Army.
so uh, and we'd had a chat prior to this call where I said, when I was, I think, 16, I'd called up our local recruiting office and said I was interested in army life because I wanted some routine because I've lived in a very chaotic household. What led you to making, like, to going in to see the recruitment officer, or was the influence of your dad, or how did that come about?
No, my dad obviously he was very supportive of the decision, but he certainly didn't push me that way or anything like that. To be honest, completely honest, it was sort of like limited options. I'm sat up in Blackpool at 16. The friends who had a bit about them, they went to college and then on to university. I was a kid who was 16 with very little in terms of academic qualifications, almost non-existent. I'd also been in trouble with the police, so in theory, I had a criminal record as well.
Mm,
So the prospects were quite low and limited. So it was sort of, well, what else can I do from here? And I loved adventure and travel, and I loved sport and being physically active. And the army was a great choice, really. It was almost a natural choice. But even going in the recruiting office, though, I learned that you need qualifications to do the jobs that you want to do. I went in there with great aspirations of, being an engineer or working in intelligence at the time or whatever it was. And actually, I was told quite quickly, your psychometric testing results are too low. You have got no A to C's, GCSE. So
yeah.
you have two options, and they both involve being a frontline soldier. One's in a tank and one's, on foot. So
Wow.
that was the reality. If you don't work hard at school, unfortunately, even in the military, your
Yeah.
options are quite limited in that respect.
Mm. And you went on to gain a whole raft of qualifications during your service. How was it? Because I'm thinking about, on the one hand, in school, you felt hemmed in and it was, the environment wasn't right. And I'm fascinated to understand how gaining your qualifications through the army works.
Yeah, the army, all the services, the navy, the army, the RAF, the Marines, that they're really brilliant at investing in their people. And I I left the army with my GCSEs, A levels, foundation degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, and it didn't cost me a penny, which is incredible because,
Yeah.
tens of thousands of pounds of education that most people go and have to get student loans and all those sorts of things for. So I'm incredibly grateful to the army for that. And I'd also say that when I was studying in the army, I was studying in a field that really interests me. I was actually studying in the field of risk management and security and safety, which is obviously related to sort of the military in a weird roundabout way. So I was really invested in the subjects. It wasn't, to me, it wasn't maths and English and science and religious studies or whatever it is you do in school. I was studying things that I was passionate about, and I think that makes a real difference. You're also, when you go to education or school as an adult, you're learning because you want to learn. You're not learning because you want to or have to learn, which is a very different, I think, proposition to you as the learner. But I was also learning because I understood that it would open new doors. So, I think some people go to education because they want to learn, but some people go to education because they want to find new opportunities. And having certain qualifications will open certain doors in the world. And I think I was probably somewhere in the middle of them. I didn't really want to spend lots of my spare time, going to college on a Tuesday and Thursday night, but I also had seen in the industry that I was interested in that having a degree will open new doors. And because I'm also looking at my sort of colleagues, and that there is tens of thousands of British Army retired veterans who are going for the same job. So how was I going to stand out in a very crowded marketplace, especially in something like the security industry, which is full of ex-military people? And for me, having a degree, and I didn't think it really mattered so much about the subject of the degree. I think having a degree shows a level of dedication and commitment to professional development that whether you got a great grade or you didn't, you've looked at a situation and tried to better yourself as a result of it. And I think employers value that. Whether I'm right or wrong, I don't know, but I certainly, knowing what I had to do to earn a degree was pretty brutal, and I only just scraped through it. And I didn't pass with flying colours by any means, and it was a challenge from the outset.
So I'm really intrigued to know, and there's so much that I want to ask you, and I'm conscious of the things that we must talk about. How did you become so focused? How was it that you sort of say, school wasn't for you, everything was not going as well as it might go, so you went, right, I'm going to join up, and now while I'm here, I think I'm going to aim for that. Fascinated to know where that came from.
Well, actually, there's a bit of a chapter in my story that I don't really talk about that often, to be honest. But you sort of there is it's a great question, because I was actually a rejoiner to the army. So I joined the army for 6 years, and then I left for 6 months, went back to Blackpool, and then realised this is not where I want to be again, and then rejoined the army. So I went to Blackpool. After the 6 years, I had no qualifications still. I was just a guy who'd been in the army for 6 years and then had left the army. I realised that I was in exactly the same situation. Of course, I had 6 years of experience, and what I remember, I had these dreams at the time of going to be like a bodyguard for celebrities and pop stars and all this sort of thing, which a lot of sort of ex-military do. And I thought that was the route I was going to go. And I can remember I got a job as the security guard at my Tesco Express in Blackpool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I'd gone from no disrespect to anyone who works at Tesco or is a security guard there or anything like that, because that isn't what this comment's about. I'd come from serving my country, wearing my medals and being on the front line and being very proud of what I do. And I wanted to go into security at a very high level. And I remember my job was pressing the button on the barrier to let cars into the Tesco supermarket. And I remember thinking, and I was doing 12-hour shifts for 6 days a week, and I still didn't even earn enough to be able to cover my mortgage and my bills and things. And it was soul destroying. And I remember one day, because my regiment recruited from Lancashire and Blackpool, and one day my friends came in on leave into the Tesco superstore. We were on leave from the army, and they was giving me all the banter and what have you.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, God, I miss those days, and it was something that clicked in me. I said, you know what, I need to go back to doing because when I left the army, it was after my one of my tours in Iraq, and we'd had quite a tough time. I'd lost a great friend and some other colleagues and what have you, some heroes, in fact. And it was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction for me just to leave. You know, I was like, oh, I don't want to, you know, I'd seen a bit of sort of death and destruction, and I thought, I need to get out of this place. And I didn't really think it through. I just decided, you know, I'm giving my notice, I'm leaving. And then when I got back to Blackpool, I realised that I wasn't actually much better off than when I left to join the army at 16. So when I went back in the army the second time, I actually went in and I looked at the job of being in the army very differently, because the first time I was in, the army was my life. It was everything. It was, you know, I lived, slept and breathed, you know, being a soldier, and that was it. Nothing else mattered. But when I went in, having had a bit of a glimpse of the outside the second time, I went in with a plan that I was going to leave again, but I was going to, I guess for a better word, exploit everything that the army has to offer me from a continued professional development perspective. Because every soldier and every person in the military has the same opportunities as me, but because you're so busy and you're so in your day job, people will never, in fact, most people, I don't think, take advantage of the opportunities and the funding available, because you know, the military doesn't make it super easy for you to find these. You have to do a lot of research. You have to attend a lot of meetings at your military education center, and there's quite a lot of barriers to. But I guess at the same time, because the army's conscious that if it trains you up to a great level, it doesn't want to lose you. So you know, there's a downside from the army and the military's perspective, but there are great systems in place in the military, but they don't jump out and come and grab you and say, come and take advantage. You have to really dig through the weeds and get in the trenches to find all these funding mechanisms. And fortunately, through, you know, meeting the right people and speaking to the right sort of chain of command and officers, I was able to get tens of thousands of pounds of funding. But that same funding's there for everybody, but you've got to be quite brutal and determined in your focus. And because I'd seen life on the outside as an adult after leaving, I needed to get back in. And not only that, I was earning money while I was learning, you know, which is quite rare. If you go to uni, you're spending money, but if you can do your qualifications and be working, being paid by the same person, that was a great advantage for me.
Wow. So, and you mentioned when we spoke previously, you know, there was just, you were learning about everything while you were in the army. So there were cultural lessons that you learned. You learned how to be a soldier. You learned, I mean, and when you returned, you were doing study. Tell me about, because you mentioned Iraq. You said there had been kind of some real life-changing moments during the tours that you did. What are the ones that stand out for you?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think wherever we find ourselves in life today, I think we're a reflection of and a sort of a product of the things we've experienced. You know, we're sort of, I guess, the architects of our own destinies, and going to Iraq as a soldier and seeing, you know, people lose their lives and sacrifice their self for their country. And it was very tough to experience that, and very emotional at times as well. But you know, and I saw the worst of humanity, but I also saw the best of humanity from people like the Iraqi people. You know, you only ever sort of really know in this world what you've seen on the news, and you're heavily influenced by the media. But when you go to a lot of these places and you meet, you know, the local people, same in, you know, whether it be Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Libya, Syria, 99% of the people in these places are good people, good, honest, hardworking people who just want peace. And it really opened my eyes to certainly the media narrative and how our brains and minds are influenced back home by what we're fed through, you know, through digital means and TV and what have you. Because as I say, I've seen more acts of kindness and love and compassion and support and than in these countries than I've ever seen in the UK. And that's not me, you know, I'm that's a very bold statement, but yeah, I believe that I've seen more positive things in these countries than perhaps negatives in many respects. You know, I think obviously it's quite a bitter pill to swallow when you lose friends and colleagues who, you know, I think that teaches you to, I guess, it teaches you the value of life and how that your world can be taken away just like that, and it gives you a real sense of gratitude, I would say, that you know, for those special moments that you share with your loved ones, your family, your children, and it allows you to understand that everything can change in you know, at the blink of an eye. So you should always make the most of all the opportunities that are given to you in life, and also live a very sort of fulfilling and rewarding life in the sense that focus on what matters in the world and not what, not what you have, but about like what I found that I often measure success these days by how much of a sort of impact I can have on someone else's life who maybe is a bit less fortunate. I think that gives me a bigger sense of satisfaction and fulfillment and reward than what would have 10, 15 years ago, which would have been, seeing how fast my car was or what watch I was wearing or how many
Yeah.
bedrooms I had in my house or whatever.
Yeah. And
It's hard to
what
learn
was
that though. You got to go through that cycle as an individual. I try to teach young people this, and I find it
yeah.
sometimes almost impossible. I think there's certain things in life that you have to learn I say the hard way, but you have to go through the challenge and the adversity to sort of build that personal perspective, but also to build resilience as well. I think these days, and I'm not one of these who thinks, the old and golden years, but I do think young people they have it very challenging in many ways, but also we need to show them how to build resilience. We need to encourage them to fail. We need to encourage them to try and get out the comfort zone.
Yeah.
We're so protective of people these days. It's like, even in schools, like the health and safety culture, people don't take risks because they're scared of what somebody might say or people don't climb trees after school anymore. They don't, I used to go paddling in the local pond, fishing. I used to make a den in the local woods, but these are things that nobody does now because it's too dangerous or it's too risky or whatever. And that's what built resilience, these sorts of things, I don't know.
It's interesting when I speak to, sometimes I perform for Women's Institute groups, and when I meet, and they come in all different shapes and sizes, all different age ranges. But when I meet the older women, they'll say, and I say to them, "How did you deal with X challenge?" They said, "Well, we just got on with it."
Yeah.
And I didn't notice that they're like, "We just got on with it." And you are all very cosseted nowadays. So I do think there is a degree of, yeah, uh, like cosseting and wrapping people in cotton wool. You said to me that you had a moment with an interpreter that really kind of inspired you to think of education as a privilege, and I wonder if you would be able to share that.
Yeah, it was. It was sort of May, early June 2005. Yeah, late May, and it was a terrible period because we'd lost a very good friend of ours, a gentleman called Alan Brackenbury. And he's a young 21-year-old lance corporal. We'd both been promoted before we left the UK on the same day in the commanding officer's office, and he was a great friend of ours. And he'd lost his life on the 29th of May, and then in the following days we'd had a bit of a tough time. We'd been hit by a fruit. We'd been hit by a few roadside bombs in the aftermath of Brax losing his life, and luckily no one had been injured and what have you. But there was this one particular occasion where we were driving to a sort of a meeting with some, I think it was local tribal leaders or local police commander or something. And anyway, we're going down this really busy road, a bit like going down something like, I don't know, the A34 or the M1, a super busy road where you would never expect to see kids playing on it or alongside it. Anyway, long story short, we came across a group of children at the side of the road, and my immediate sort of thoughts were, this could be like an ambush or something. You're always looking for what we would call a presence of the abnormal in a conflict zone, something that's out of place, because that can sort of like be an indicator that something might not be right or is about to go wrong. And something stood out to me about these children at the side of the road. There was a bit of commotion. And anyway, we got there, and tragically, a little boy had basically lost his leg. He'd inadvertently stepped on a roadside bomb. Obviously, that bomb wasn't designed to hit him. It was probably designed to hit one of the patrols, the British patrols. But tragically, this boy had inadvertently hit this roadside bomb, and he'd lost his leg. And the medic and myself and various others, we tried to patch him up, and unfortunately, he'd had sort of what we would call a catastrophic bleed, and he'd lost a lot of blood, and tragically, he'd lost his life, which was obviously horrific. But what stood out to me was on the way back to camp, I was sort of reflecting on the situation, and I said to our interpreter, I said, sort of mulling the situation over in my head, I said, what were these kids doing playing next to this busy road? I said, why were they not at school like everyone else? And I remember the interpreter looked at me in sort of real disgust at the time, and he said, he sort of like almost shouted at me and said, "Jordan, don't be ridiculous," sort of thing. He said, "These kids will never go to school. There is no school for these kids. They're very poor, and even if they did, the school is, X amount of kilometers away." And I just remember sort of feeling really low at that point. And I remember that evening lying in my sort of sleeping bag in our tent in Iraq, and I remember sort of making a little bit of a pledge and a promise to myself that I was reflecting how, even though I didn't do well at school, it made me for the first time think what a privilege I had to be able to go to school. And,
Yeah.
a lot of these kids would have done anything to go to school. So even though I didn't really apply myself or take best advantage of the situation, it made me really reflect on that. And that was probably the first real lesson around education that I sort of experienced. And anyway, that night in my sort of tent, I made the pledge to myself that one day I'd like to come back and help children who've been affected by conflict or poverty or whatever it might be. And I guess I couldn't really put my finger on what that promise was ever going to look like or what it was going to be. But then I'm quite proud to say that 15, 20 years later, over the last 5 years, I've delivered a school on the Horn of Africa with a lot of amazing people who've helped me fundraise and donors and sponsors and things. And yeah, we raised over $250,000 and delivered a school for hundreds of children in a country called Djibouti, on the Horn of Africa. So it's amazing how the world works and the lessons that you're taught, and so yeah, it really changed my perspective on education, that incident, I guess. And I guess it was the catalyst for a lot of positive things that have happened in my life, like going back to education, like trying to help people access education, especially in war and conflict zones and challenging environments.
And the charity that you built the school through is Frontline Children, is that right?
Yeah, Frontline Children. It's a very small charity, tiny charity, very small projects. The big flagship project was to build that school. It does amazing little projects in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Sierra Leone, and the simple principle is trying our best to help children access education. Whether that's from building a school at one extreme to providing some books and pens, or even internet connectivity. It could be anything as simple as that. And yeah, the charity, we've just got a new CEO and chairman, James Gray and James Bingham, who are both incredibly motivated and good people who are going to drive the charity forward for the next 3 to 5 years, I'm sure. So it's amazing to be an ambassador for that charity and to fly the flag, because it's a charity where nobody takes a salary. They're all volunteers, which is quite unique, I find, in the charity sector. So it's a special little charity, and it's done some great work, and I'm very proud to have been part of that journey.
Awesome. And so you said there's a sort of 15, 20-year gap between making a promise to yourself to take action when you can and being able to deliver a school. What adventures did you have in that period? Because I think there's quite a lot.
There was lots of adventures. Yeah, I try to have an adventure every day, to be honest. It's not always very extreme, but whether it's swimming in my local river in Hampshire, or having an ice bath, or climbing up a mountain, jumping out of a plane, or doing ridiculous things like trying to paddleboard around Britain or run a marathon in Antarctica. So anything that I could do to get the sort of coppers in the pot to build the school, I was taking on for 5 or 6 years. I've sort of, I won't say calmed down a bit, but I'm a bit more, because we've built this school and we've delivered this school, I've sort of stepped back a little bit for the short term, because it was quite a lot of pressure and stress as well to try and raise that sort of money, and it took its sort of toll on my own sort of health at times. So, but no, I think paddling around Great Britain was probably the one that perhaps raised the most for this particular school. It raised over 100,000 towards the school, and it was an amazing adventure to try and paddleboard around the whole of Great Britain during the middle of a global pandemic, which was challenging in itself. But what an amazing action-packed adventure where I met incredible people, raised lots of money and had an epic adventure.
I mean, I thought we were only allowed out for an hour a day.
Yeah, we were. And then when the restrictions lifted, I had to. I was looking for ways because when the restrictions lifted, we still weren't allowed to fly outside the country, because the airports had different closure thing. So I decided that my home was gonna be, a transit van, and I kept on paddling. I was obviously socially distanced. We played by the rules, and unfortunately, the paddle got stopped after 5 months at sea because Scotland went into a level 5 lockdown, which meant that you literally had to go home. We got an email from the sort of Scottish First Minister's office saying that, unfortunately, it's great what you've done. You've had a great adventure, but your time's sort of up. We're locking the country down. So, we could have challenged it and maybe paddled on, but it wouldn't have been good role modeling. It wouldn't have been the right thing to do.
If only some other people could have thought about that.
Yeah. Well, what was really frustrating, actually, to be honest, at the time, was elite sport was allowed to continue. So rugby football matches was allowed to continue, and we did consider the argument of we're an elite sport, we're adventure, we're high level adventure, extreme adventure, we're professional adventurers doing this. So why are we any different? And we thought, you know what, it just would put a negative sort of taste on the whole thing to start arguing with the government, especially when so many people had lost their lives and been through horrific things. We didn't want to make the headlines for all the wrong reasons after we'd done so much good in the world with the charity project. So we took a sort of strategic decision that we've been asked to stop. We've had a great adventure, we've raised loads of money, let's do the right thing and set an example to others.
So you spent 5 months on a stand-up paddleboard going around the coast of the UK. Okay. You ran a marathon in Antarctica.
Yeah, well, yeah, we ran. Well, the plan was to run 10 marathons in the 10 coldest places on Earth, and because COVID came, we were only sort of, I don't know, 5 or 6 marathons into this project, so we had to think of something that we could do at home, and that was where the paddle came from. Because so I've still got 3 more runs to do. This project's been going on for about 4 years now, and although the fundraising's finished, I've still got to go to the North Pole in about 8 weeks' time to do one there. I've got one in Svalbard, which is in the Arctic sort of circle. It's in the top of Norway, a small island, and I've got to do Mongolia as well, which probably this year. It'll probably be January next year, but I'll do the 2 in April, Svalbard and North Pole, I think.
Okay, and you ran a marathon underground, record breaking.
Yeah, we held the record for the deepest underground marathon, over 1,000 meters below the surface in the North Sea. It's a new Guinness World Record. So that was all in aid of children's mental health for the Army cadets. So that was a great little adventure in its own right.
Okay. And I don't want to get it wrong. I don't watch a lot of telly. I don't watch a lot of current television because I'm still living in the 90s. I'm still living in the 90s. But you are on Hunted. You were on Hunted, yes?
Yeah, still on Hunted. Hunted, it's a Channel 4 TV show, Hunted and Celebrity Hunted. I'm one of the hunters, so again, it's just a little bit of fun and adventure. I get to pretend fugitives around the country in aid of a good cause, and use a bit of my sort of old military skills to try and track them down with lots of very professional detectives and intelligence professionals and what have you. So it's great fun, and it's what I like. I don't really buy into things like celebrity culture, and I don't watch a lot of TV myself, but what it does do is it gives me a little bit of a profile to do some positive things with, and helping things like the cadets and the Cubs and the Scouts and those sorts of things is great. So I'm not a huge TV fan as such, but I appreciate and respect the benefits that I get from being on Hunted for sure.
And how did you? Because you said you had that moment where you were at the Tesco car park, realizing that the security detail you thought you might have got coming out of the army was not going to come to fruition, and then you are a hunter on Hunted. So how did that happen? How did you I know you returned to the army, studied, but I'm intrigued to how you found your way to
well, actually, when I was in the army, even though I was in a sort of frontline combat tank regiment, all my experience on operations was sort of in the world of intelligence. So I went and did some various training courses with the intelligence corps, and I was able to get some qualifications and do some training in the world of intelligence operations. So that's where my sort of, I guess, pedigree of intelligence comes from. But when I left the army, before I sort of went into the world of adventure, I spent a good maybe 4 or 5 years in private security. So I did get to achieve that goal, what I wanted to earlier in my life. But actually, it wasn't as glamorous as I thought it was. It was very well paid. It was very well paid. Don't get me wrong, but it was certainly far in terms of expectations. It wasn't as perhaps glamorous as a lot of people think it is, that world. But it opened up lots of new doors because it allowed me to travel the world as a security professional. You know, and it allowed me to earn a very good salary for a few years as well, which then in turn helped me go into do adventures, which doesn't pay a good salary.
Yeah, and I'm interested to know actually, because I guess it's when you are a high profile elite adventurer, and there's lots that goes along with it. And actually, if I think about what I see consistently is that people like yourself are elite adventurers, but giving back in terms of, like, say you represent the Army Cadets or working with the Scout movement. So how do you kind of make that work for you? Like, just like you say, it doesn't pay great.
Well, it doesn't pay at all to the work with cadets and charities and things. But you know, I think for me as an adventurer, you know, and I certainly wouldn't call myself elite or anything like that, but as an adventurer who loves the outdoors, and someone who has a little bit of a social profile, I think with that sort of privilege comes a lot of responsibility. I believe that I have a responsibility to use my little bit of a profile to do good, to try and inspire young people. You know, if I'm privileged enough to be sent on these crazy, amazing adventures around the world, well, you know that comes for me at a price, and the price to me is, you know, your commitment to young people in the next generation. Show them how you can achieve your goals, your dreams, your objectives, you know, and demonstrate that. And I spend most of my days going into schools and youth organizations as a volunteer, trying to encourage, support, hopefully inspire or motivate. And I see that as a responsibility that you have as an adventurer. I think adventuring is not just about going to extreme, crazy places and having fun. It's about pushing the boundaries of physical endurance, of psychological endurance. It's about using your adventures to have a positive impact on the world, whether that's through education, whether it's through charity causes, whether it's through campaigning and championing for equality, or whatever it might be, whatever you're passionate about, I guess. But I think, you know, adventure is more than just having fun and traveling. It comes, if you're taking your role seriously, you have a responsibility to society to do some good in the world, I think.
And there's 2 questions I want to ask you. There's more than 2 questions. There's so many questions I want to ask you. If I thinking about, so let's take adventure first. How do you, because you just really lit a light bulb for me there, in that there may be a perception that it is right if you're going to run, like if you're going to run a marathon or do ultra marathons, or you're going to run in the Antarctic, it's just about, you know, willpower and nutrition, but you've just got to drive, push. But there's a lot more to it than that. We talked briefly before about how you need to combine, and I know this is something you're passionate about, like science and math, engineering, all of these things to make an adventure a success. So I'm fascinated for you to sort of share a bit about your thinking in that area.
Yeah, I guess it sort of goes back to where we started at the start of the conversation, where, you know, for me, being in a classroom was really difficult. I didn't get maths, I didn't get science, I didn't get, you know, tech and all those sorts of things. They just didn't click in my mind. But then through adventure and the medium of adventure, I've found that actually, you know, STEM, as they call it, science, tech, engineering, maths, as they call it in schools these days, STEM is at the core of everything I do. You know, whether that's on a paddleboard, in a rowing boat, a parachute, hanging off the side of a mountain with some ropes, and, you know, my GPS or whatever it might be. That is all science, tech, engineering, and maths. If I'm going to row somewhere or run or cycle, you know, I look at things like speed, time, distance, calorie intake. I look at engineering. You know, I look at the bike and how the bike pedals and the cogs turn, and how on the paddleboard the buoyancy and the drag and the weight and the ratios and things. So it's just a way of learning for me. And actually, learning through an adventure, a real life adventure, is so much more engaging and interesting than reading out of a textbook inside four walls. And I just try again to use my adventures to help educate young people who might be don't even need to be struggling. Just it's another way, it's an alternative method of learning. And what we try to do using teachers and education consultants is I try to make my adventures, or certainly my recent ones, I try to align them with the national curriculum. So even though I'm doing what I want on the adventure or whatever the goal is, there are lots of learning opportunities for people who are following it. So instead of just saying, sponsor me, I'm going there, I'm saying, yeah, please do sponsor me. But also in return, I'm going to give you a work pack that you can work through in your own time or in your class with your teachers that will help you understand more about the topics that you need to learn about this year. And again, I try to integrate into those sorts of expedition STEM lessons, things like, the topics which are current right now and are important, things like sustainability, things like climate change, things that the world and the next generation needs to be more aware of and conscious about. And I think using adventure as an education tool is so much more interesting than sitting, in a classroom. For me, anyway. Don't get me wrong. There's children out there. There's lots of children out there in the world who learn perfectly fine, and that classroom setting is great for them. The ones where it's risk-free, it's indoor, and it suits those with a long concentration span who are very academically gifted, and that's fine. But all I'm trying to do is help those who need a bit of something else, a bit of that magic ingredient what no one's really ever put a finger on.
And how can you bring some of this stuff to life for children that are on the council estates and don't have access to? Because I do see I've had when I used to work in corporates, we'd always have some Olympian come in who had the best possible start in life. So of course they're going to be amazing at rowing. And I'd love to know how you feel you can bring adventure to all children, regardless of what their background is.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do now. And I guess the challenge is it's funding, because I'm not looking to make any money. For me, it's a voluntary project. But what it does need is to develop new content and fresh content, which is all curriculum aligned and aligned to things like the United Nations sustainability goals. It needs things like project managers. It needs teachers and education consultants to help me map my adventures to the national curriculum. And at the moment, I've been paying for that sort of thing out my own pocket. And we've come up with a few pilot models, and I've proved the concept. I've tried it in schools. I've had great feedback. I've got lots of letters and testimonials. But now it's trying to find someone who seriously wants to help take it to the next level so we can make it a national free resource. And so if there's anybody listening, or companies or donors out there, as I say, it's not about me. I don't need to take anything from this, but I've got this proven concept now that, but unfortunately, education consultants don't work for free. Project managers don't work for free.
And let's talk about you as an author. How did this start? Was it always within you and you wanted to bring it to life?
I know, definitely. I think it's within all of us. I think everybody has got a book and a story to tell. It's just that most people don't sit down and take the time to do that. For me, I think it was managing my own mental health again. I think like getting outdoors was great, but I sometimes found I struggled to talk to people who were close to me about my feelings and my thoughts. I'm quite closed. People would say I'm cold sometimes, like partners and people would say, "Oh, he's really cold, isn't he?" But I'm not, and I just find it hard to talk about sensitive issues to people who I love and who are close to me. So I started writing I started journaling and blogging and things many years ago. And I found that I was not too bad at writing my thoughts and feelings. I wasn't good at speaking about them, but I could write them down. And I guess it just went from there, really, and really enjoy it. I've wrote lots of things that have never been published as well. I've been working on a personal diary blog about young people and how we prepare them better for the future and things like that I probably won't publish, but it's helped me with my own work, just writing my thoughts and feelings down.
And did you write a book with your daughter? You did write a book.
We did, but I say we wrote a book. It was a colouring book.
Okay.
So there wasn't that much writing in it, but it was a colouring book during lockdown. In fact, it was all the flags of the world, and then it was like a workbook where you would colour the flagging, but you would also have to do some research and find out things like the capital city, the currency, the population, the culture. So it was helping young people hopefully learn more about the world, and it was a sort of a charity project for a local charity.
And how do your experiences with education sort of inform your approach as a parent when you talk to your daughter about what she might go on to study, or what your guidance would be?
I think it's really tough. I think it's really tough not to enforce your own opinions on a young person. I think, I remember years ago I started to do it with sport and football and things like that, and I can remember, like, taking my daughter to places when she probably didn't really want to, or maybe not enjoyed it, but I felt that she should try things. And these days I just try to present her with lots of opportunities and see what she enjoys and see what she takes to. Of course, I love football. I would love her to be a super football fan, but she isn't. She likes football, but she's not. She's not like perhaps some of my friends' children who worship football, and that's fine. You've got to be. I think in life you have to find things that you're passionate about, because that brings out the best in you. That's where you get to your peak performance in life, whether it's in a classroom or whether it's on a sports pitch or whether it's an adventure or business or love. When you're passionate about something, that's when you're at your peak performance. So I try not to force opinions and things onto my daughter, especially. I let her, experience the world through her eyes and follow whatever she's passionate about. I think that's all you can do, and then support whatever she decides are her passions. You do your best to support that as a parent.
Yeah. How well, not how, what has held you in good stead throughout the many, many facets of your life so far?
I think the best tool that I carry and that we all carry is our values. I think values are what I probably didn't really have that many of when I was a young person, and I probably learned and sort of harnessed my own values, things like courage, respect, integrity, loyalty, discipline, selfless commitment. I think those sorts of values that I learned as a soldier are the same values that I live by today, 12 years after leaving the army. I think values ultimately are what guide and values guide our behavior. They inform our decision making, and they're the best tool that we have at our disposal. And I think, they allow you to understand very quickly and immediately, in fact, if you're doing right or wrong in the world, or if you're, following the right track, or you need to sort of tweak and adjust your internal compass and maybe move in a different direction. I think values are the golden thread to all the things we do, really.
Yeah. And I'm just kind of curious about, like, there are so many things that you've done where I think people would go, either that's too hard, or I can't be bothered. Um, but mostly that's too hard. And how do you break these things, like these challenges and adventures, down into something that is not easy to do, but something that you can achieve?
Well, yeah, I think, as you say there, it's about breaking it down. It's like with any goal or objective, whether it's in the workplace or out on a mountain. It's, you do your research, you train for it. Again, I must say, I'm not the fastest or the fittest I'm in the world. I'm not an elite level athlete. I'm a passionate adventurer, but at the same time, I love, on a Friday night having a beer and a pizza with my friends. I'm not somebody who's watching everything
Thank
I eat or
goodness.
anything. Yeah, I'm not. I'm not an athlete. I'm an adventurer. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's about any goal. It depends how much you want something. I think you have to start with why. What's the reason why you're deciding to do what you do, or what you want to do? Because the reason why has to be strong. And for me, using things like building a school or a charitable cause helps me go that extra 5-10% when I really want to give up. I think you have to go back to why you started in the first place. And it's very easy to lack motivation. I think, again, going back to values, the value of discipline. Discipline is something that most of us lack in abundance, but discipline is the one thing that will allow you to keep going when you really can't be bothered. Discipline is what gets you out of bed on a Monday morning when you're thinking, I want to be anywhere but going into work or into school or whatever. It's discipline. Discipline's about doing what you need to do, even when you don't want to do it. And that, having that routine and that ability just to stick to the plan and stay in the game is really, really powerful. And I think that's why the military works so well, because everybody is so disciplined. You know, people don't want to be polishing their boots every night ready for the next day, but they do it because it's what they're supposed to do. It's what they have to do for parade in the morning. You know, people don't want to be getting up at 5 a.m. and getting shouted at to go running around the athletics track in the military, but they do it because they know they need to be fit, because somebody might, you know, if it kicks off tomorrow in the Ukraine or Russia or whatever, they know that they've got to be fit enough to take on the job. And the soldiers have that discipline inside them to do what they need to do, regardless if they want to do it or not. And I think if we put that into society in the civilian sense, I think a lot more people would achieve their goals, because we're humans. You cannot be motivated every day. Even the best, most elite level athletes, the Olympic gold medalists, they're not motivated every day, but they're incredibly disciplined, and they get up and they do what they have to do. They get into a routine and habit. You know, it's that sort of habit of excellence, really.
And I do that. It's a different perspective to that of the army. But the discipline thing is that there's one thing when I had my first child, but I remember the midwife, when she comes to see you like a couple of days afterwards, and she said, if you only do one thing, she said, get up and get yourself showered before you do all the stuff that you have to do with the baby. But it was such an important thing, and I always did it. But it was like, if you can get up and get yourself showered and dressed, then you're like, okay, you know, when you are
you've
feeling
won the day. You've won the day already. You know, you win the morning and win the day. We say it's like in the military, that same concept, but we call it making your bed. You know, make your bed every day, every morning, because already, you know, you get out your bed and you've already achieved the first task of the day, and you're on a positive. You know, you've started the day, you've hit the ground running, so to speak. And as many sort of commanding officers and generals have said over the years, even if you have a bad day, at least you've got a comfy bed that's been made to get back into at the end.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. You don't want to go into your bedroom and go, oh, it's a mess, covered in clothes. So what is next, Jordan? I mean, you're still driven, still got some marathons to run, but is there a plan for another school or something, another book, something completely different?
No, at the moment, I'm sort of I've got these marathons to finish still. You know, I'm going to be taking a group back out to the school in Africa in November. But yeah, I'm not in a rush to go and take on building a school again. It was quite stressful. So you know, to be completely honest, I'm probably never going to go and try and take on a challenge over that sort of length of time, 5 years to build that school, and the duration and the stresses that it caused. And so I'm probably not going to do anything as big as that in terms of charitable fundraising, but I will continue to help causes that I'm passionate about. I would love to do something. I'm from a place in Lancashire called Blackpool, and I would love to go back to Blackpool and do something special for my hometown. That's probably something over the next few years that I'm going to look at in more detail. You know, Blackpool, I would love to provide some opportunities for young people in Blackpool, people who need a bit of guidance and maybe nudging back on the straight and narrow, people who are lacking in terms of opportunity and support. So Blackpool is high on my agenda for the next few years of doing some good there, hopefully. But yeah, probably more of the same, crazy adventures. Maybe another book in the future, but helping young people, that's where I am at today. I think trying to be a positive role model in some way, shape, or form.
Wow. Well, all of it. It's just really inspiring, and I was so glad I got to have some time with you. For people that want to follow what comes next, and I know you've got a new TEDx talk that is live. Where's the best place to go to look at the many things that you are up to?
Do you know, I probably on the website. I don't like to push people to. I'm on Instagram and what have you, and I don't like to push people towards these social media platforms, because I part of me still believe that they do a lot more damage than good in some respects, and I've seen them destroy a lot of lives, you know, and I've worked on quite a few projects recently with young people that have tragically taken their lives. So I'm not going to encourage everyone to jump in front of a screen and follow me on Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is these days. But always on my website, jordanwiley.org, that you find out what I'm up to. But yeah, that's that, you know, and I'll always reply to messages if I get emails and things as well.
Well, as I found out. So it's an absolute pleasure have you on the podcast. Thank you for being here, Jordan.
No, thank you for having me, Tony, and keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thanks.